Welcome back to part 2 of learning JavaScript with chatgpt. In the last video, we talked about basic concepts. In this video, we're going to explore functions. We're going to be looking at declaring calling functions, function parameters and arguments, returning values from functions, and higher order functions. These are the functions that take other functions as arguments and return them. Let's begin with using the function keyword and explore the arrow functions. So I have copied the function's general concepts right here. I'm just going to copy this and start a new chat. And I'm going to say, explain this. I'm going to paste this with code examples. Okay, declaring functions allows you to create a block of code that can be called later in your program. There are two ways to declare a function in JavaScript, using the function keyword and using arrow functions. I'd just like to point out that these do exactly the same thing. It's just arrow functions are a way to write the functions more concisely. Here's an example of declaring a function using the function keyword. To declare a function, you first declare this keyword function and then the name of the function, open parentheses and in this case, it takes an argument called name. This is an argument. And then you close the parentheses and then open a curly bracket, and console.log is a way to print the result into the terminal or your console. And this is a string. We talked about this in the previous video, but we're using a string literal, so we can insert a variable inside of the string. And then we say hello, and then the name. To insert a variable into a string literal, you start with a $, then open within curly brackets. You just put in the name of your function. In this case, it's name. And when we say greet John, then the output will be hello John. Let's just test this out real quick. If we paste this and if we run it, let me start a terminal. Yeah, it prints out hello John. But we could have put here Jenny, and it would have printed out Jenny. So whatever this argument that it accepts can be anything. So this is useful. Here's an example of declaring a function using an arrow function. So instead of going through all this process, you can kind of simplify it. For example, you can get rid of the function. You can assign it to a kind of like a variable name, like you would do a variable. Here we declare a constant and then greet, and we open and close parentheses with the argument, and then equal sign, and then greater than sign, and then curly brackets, and then the exact same thing. The name of the function is still greet. If you were to try this and run it, it's going to print out the exact same thing, in this case John. Arrow functions are a more concise syntax for declaring functions, and they do not have their own this value. They are not always suitable for every situation, but they can be useful in cases where you want to write shorter, more concise code. If you remember, with objects, we were using this. Is there anything else I need to know about what you just explained? Okay, it says here are a few additional points to consider when declaring functions in JavaScript. Functions can be defined in the global scope, in which case they are available to be called from anywhere in the code. They can also be defined inside other functions, in which case they are only available to be called from within those functions. Functions can take 0 or more arguments. In this example I gave above, greet function takes one argument, name. You can also define functions that take no arguments, like this. In this case, as you see, there is no arguments that are put in these brackets, and the console, this will just log hi to the console. So functions don't have to take arguments. Arguments are optional, and they can take as many arguments as you like. Functions can return a value by calling by caller by using return. Okay, we're going to talk about all this, so let's just read this. Arrow functions can be defined using the concise syntax if they only take one argument and their body is a single expression. So arrow functions can only be used for a single variable. Is that true? Let's fix it. Sometimes ChatGPT can mislead. So if we run this, it should print. Well, it's not printing, so we have to console log the result. Sorry, I made a typo. I did not put the console.log. Okay, let's try again. Yeah, it prints 8. Could it have taken 2 arguments? X and Y, for example, and then could we have said X plus Y and then multiply it by? Let's try this. Yeah. Okay, it does not do that. Okay, that's interesting. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. Okay, let's move on to function parameters. Explain with code examples. In JavaScript, function parameters are variables that are defined in the function definition and receive the values that are passed to the function when it is called. You can use default parameters and rest parameters to specify the behavior of function parameters in different ways. Default parameters allow you to specify default values for function parameters in case no value is provided for them when the function is called. For example, here in this case, we're defining a function and then we're declaring an argument. We are putting an argument into the function and then we're setting its default value to John. So if we were to copy this, it will automatically print John if we were to comment this out and just simply run the greet function. It should print John. Why? We haven't put in any arguments into the function, but its default value is John. But here, if we were to put another name for the variable, for the argument, then it will print that. So these are defaults. Functions can have default arguments. In this example, it says the name parameter has a default value of John. So if the greet function is called with no arguments, it will use this default value. If an argument is provided, it will use that value instead. Rest parameters allows you to represent an indefinite number of arguments as an array. For example, here it says, again, we're defining a function sum and then ... numbers. And then we're going to define a variable inside the function 0 and then make a for loop. We're going to talk about loops. Const number. Yes, we're defining, okay, number of numbers. So we're going to loop over whatever is in the argument. And then result is going to be equal to plus equals number. We start with 0. So in this case, if we were to print sum 1, 2, 3, as you can see, we can also put up to 5 or up to any amount of numbers here. Then it will add each and every one of them, and this will output 6 and this will output 15. Let's see it. 6 and 15. So this rest parameter allows you to input indefinite number of parameters to a function. In this example, the sum function uses the rest parameter, ... for example, numbers in this case, but this numbers is arbitrary. It could have been anything. It could have been strings too, right? So this numbers doesn't matter. It's the ... that matters. To represent an indefinite number of numbers, arguments. It then uses a loop to iterate over the numbers, arrays, and add up all the elements. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. Okay, let's move on to the return values. It was already trying to tell us about that. Code examples. In JavaScript, a function can return a value to the caller by using return keyword. As you see, we've done it right here. When it returns it, it means it has calculated the result and is returning it, right? That's why we're actually doing the console.log by calling the function inside of it, because this function will return the result and then console.log will print it. We could have, alternatively, we could have just did a console.log within the function For example, we could have done this, and then we didn't need all of this. We could have just called function itself. And if we run it, then it gives us 55. It's the sum of all these numbers because we are printing it directly inside of the function. Okay, so returning. For here we're defining a function with an x argument, and then it will return x multiplied by x, so the square. And then the result is square 2 will be 4. In this example, the square function calculates the square of its argument x and returns the result to the caller using the return keyword. You can also define functions that do not explicitly return a value, in which case they will return undefined by default. For example, function do nothing, actually, and we have a comment here, does nothing, and then if we were to assign its result to a variable, then it's undefined. If we try to log this, we get undefined. Implicit return values are values that are returned without using the return keyword. They are allowed in arrow functions where the function body consists of a single expression, for example. So these are especially, I think, only useful only applies to arrow functions. Here in this case, this is a function written with arrows. We say, okay, take x and then multiply it with 2 and then return. And the return is implicit here. And then we assign the result, like for example, call the function, which is double, with the argument 4, result should be 8. Let's log the result. So the result is 8. We could have said 10, and the result would be 20. In this example, the value of x multiplied by 2 is implicitly returned by the double function right here. The equivalent function using an explicit return statement would be like this. So this is, again, the arrow function, but this time use the explicit return statement. Why would you want to do that? Well, for readability purposes. Really, if you were looking at somebody else's or code, like they say you found at GitHub, you just might not be immediately understanding what this is. Versus this is more explicitly defined. It's easier to read, so-called. So this does exactly the same thing. Okay, let's take a look at higher order functions. Explain to me with code examples. Higher order functions are functions that take other functions as arguments or return them as output. They're called higher order because they operate on functions rather than just values. Here's an example of a higher order function that takes other functions as arguments. Okay, here in this case, we're defining a function called call twice, and its argument is a function, and we call the function inside of the function twice. And then function says hi, console log hi. So then we define another function. So this function, just the func keyword here is an arbitrary placeholder for any function that you can actually put in to call twice, right? So if you're defining another function that say hi, called say hi, it just simply prints hi, and then we run the function call twice with the function say hi in it. Then this should print us 2 highs. Yeah, it's actually twice, as you see. It did print it twice. It just put it like you can see the 2 here. For example, we could have done it one more time. If we run it, then it prints it 3 times. In this example, call twice function takes a function called func in this case as an argument and calls it twice. The say hi function is passed as an argument to call twice, so it gets called twice. Here's an example of a higher order function that returns another function. So let's see, we're defining a function called create greeting. It takes in an argument called name, and then it returns a function which console logs a string literal, hello, and then the name. Then we say, okay, a new function is create greet. So we're defining a new function by running the create greeting function, and the create greeting function is returning this function. So then the greet becomes this function. As you see, this is defined as just a function, and as parentheses open and close. And then when we run the greet as a function, then it returns the name John. Here we go. Perfect. We could have put in any other name. Cindy. And it says Cindy. I hope you're enjoying these videos. Please like and subscribe if you would like to be notified of future videos. And please leave your thoughts and recommendations in the comments. In this example, the create greeting function takes the name argument as here and returns a new function that greets the given name, which is this function. The return function is assigned to the greet variable, and when it is called, it outputs the greeting. The higher order functions can be very useful in functional programming, as they allow you to abstract away common patterns of function composition and reuse them in different contexts. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. Say, is there anything else I need to know about functions in JS? Okay, it's giving us a list. Let's just read through it real quick. Here are a few more things. All right. Functions can be declared in several different ways in JavaScript, including function declarations. We've looked into that. Function expressions and arrow functions. Functions can be defined as object methods, in which case they are called methods. Functions can be stored in variables passed as arguments to other functions and returned as values from functions. Yeah, yep, we've looked into that. Maybe we can ask this, what is a function expression? It can be used to define object constructors, in which case they are called constructor functions. We're going to look into that in a future video. Functions can be bound to a specific value of this using the bind method, which creates a new function with the desired this value. Functions can be, I guess you can assign it this value. You can explicitly bind it. Functions can be curried, which means that they can be partially applied to create a new functions with a fixed number of arguments. So we won't go through all of these. I mean, most of it we covered, most of the important ones we covered. But what I would like you to take away from this video is not that you just watch this video and know everything about functions, right? You have to first, hopefully you're coding it yourself in JavaScript, Visual Studio Code or your favorite IDE. Get your hands on and write some code, experiment with it. And learning programming is, I think, exciting and fun. Don't see it like a chore. And just a video can be helpful, but practicing really gets it done. But as far as like how you can use ChatGPT to your advantage is that, like for example, we just heard something that maybe we're confused about. What is function expressions? Tell me more about this. And I'm going to copy this. And paste it here. Let's see what it is. So you can actually keep asking questions to it. Just keep in mind that ChatGPT can be gracefully and sometimes confidently wrong. Always make sure you're also searching it in the appropriate documentation as well. In this case, for example, JavaScript documentation. I'll put this into the link, by the way. It's Mozilla. And here you have tutorials, references, and then there's like a search, I believe, like we can type in functions and you can read all about functions here. So, do this as well. Just don't rely on ChatGPT alone, please. But let's see what it said about the function expressions. Function expressions are a way to define a function in JavaScript using an expression syntax. Way to define, okay. They're created using the function keyword, but unlike function declarations, they're not given a name and they do not require a name. Function pair in object literals. Oh, okay. Yeah, we actually witnessed this here with the returning function. So this is a function expression, so we've already used it. Here we are defining a square function and we just say function and then we put in an x argument and that returns just square of x. All right. In this example, the square function is defined as a function expression and assigned to a variable. It can then be called like any other function. Function expressions can also be anonymous, which means that they're not given a name. Triple. Well, isn't that the same thing? Function expressions can be useful when you need to define a function that only will be used in a specific context, or only once, for example. Or when you want to define a function and assign it to a variable at the same time. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any other questions. So we could have been asking other questions that can be queried. Let's just see what this is. How about this? In functional programming, querying refers to the process of breaking down a function that takes multiple arguments into a series of functions that each take a single argument. This can be useful when you want to create a series of functions that have the same behavior, but with some of the arguments fixed. Here's an example of querying a function in JavaScript. So we're defining a function, we're returning a function y, which returns x plus y. Oh, I see. So because we could have said, this is just adding x and y together, right? We could have just defined it inside of x. And I mean, instead of add, saying x and y, but now it's actually breaking it down. It's giving each variable to a different function, which is like kind of like nested inside of the other function. In this case, we define a variable add 10 to add 10. And then when we console log add 10. Oh, and then add 10. It becomes a function, and then we pass. So functional programming can be a bit confusing at first. So what happens if we run this? 15, yeah. So we're first defining a function add x, which returns another function called y. So when we say add 10 equals to add 10 equals to add, which takes 10 as an argument, then the 10 is relayed to this function, and then this function is returned and assigned to add 10. So now add 10 is a function, which is this, with an x value of already 10. And then when we say add 10 5, this 5 now is the y. So now we're completing the y, 5, x was already 10, and y is already 5, and then it prints 15. Okay, pretty cool. Let's read the rest of it. Let's see how ChatGPT explained this. In this example, the add function takes a single argument x and returns a new function that takes a single argument y. When the return function is called with an argument y, it adds x and y together and returns the result. All right. The add 10 function is created by calling add with the argument 10, which creates a new function that adds 10 to its argument. Yeah, see, I hope you're following. When add 10 is called with the argument 5, it returns the result 15. Querying can be useful when you want to create a series of functions that have similar behavior. But with some of the arguments fixed, it can also make it easier to write code that is more modular and reusable. I hope this helps. Well, I hope this helps myself. I am actually learning a lot myself, and I hope you're enjoying this series. And like I said, please like and subscribe, and leave your comments, your thoughts, your praises, your criticism. And I'll see you next time.